until about I was doing fine until about 10 minutes ago when I saw my daughter show up. Well, so my daughter, if you're really observant, you see my daughter here, Sage Rush, shares my name, of course, and my blood, and her lovely husband, my son-in-law, Ben Goebel, they live in Philadelphia. So now I got to rework my whole story because my daughter's going to fact check me like, hey, Dad, I don't think that was exactly the way it went down. So, okay, here we go. And I think, Sage, you said you might have to leave early. So thanks for being here, everybody. I see some real familiar faces. And, you know, what just popped into my head was a Bob Dylan quote. And it goes something like this. I forget if it's exactly like this, but something like, if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. And, you know, I'm about 68 years old now. In one of my intros, I said I'm close to my 8th decade of life, which when I turn 70, it'll be my 8th decade that I enter. So God willing, I'll be here. But I really want to start just by mentioning, you know, the last 10 days. You know, 10 days ago was Buffalo, then Texas. And I really just want to take 1 minute and mention another name. Some of you know David Mudd, a dear friend of mine who passed away yesterday from a heart attack. I know Elaine is here from Kentucky and from Cincinnati. The small group community knows David well. So I'm going to just dedicate my story to David because David's death, it's only been a day, but it's just another reminder about how brief life is and how precious every moment is. And every time I experience a death as I get older, it's a reminder to wake up. So what gave me hope and what I shared in my small group is that this is what gives me hope. Right at this screen right now, this hour, one of my favorite Peter Block quotes is that every hour needs to be an example of our intention. Otherwise, the hour is gone. The hour is going to be gone in 60 minutes. And living in this Zoom room today is what gives me hope, along with many other things. But I thought that would be a good opening question because of what we've just been through again in this country. And of course, all over the world, we know it's a very, it's a difficult time for billions of people, whether you're in Europe, Ukraine, wherever you are. So what I wanted to do with my time today is just share a little bit of my story. So being a teacher and a you know, student of lifelong learning, I always love stories. And I remember one of my favorite teachers in elementary school used to say, gather around, boys and girls, take a piece of carpet. And she used to read to us every single day a story right before we went to lunch. It was our exit ticket to lunch. If you be quiet, I'll read you another story. So she started her stories with the classic Once Upon a Time. So that's how I'll start this story. And here's my story. So in this slide deck that I want to get synchronized here. There we go. Okay. All right, there we go. So can you see the screen?
No. I think you stopped screen sharing.
Yeah, no.
Don't you love technology? Okay, there we go. How about now? Got it? Okay, once upon a time, there was a boy named Lee. And here I am at age 15, a half a century ago. I was not the happiest camper at age 15. If you look closely, you see a black eye. I used to get in a fair amount of scraps on the street and on the playground. I was a rough and tumble guy. I was the oldest of 4 boys, and my sister was 2 years older than me. My mother, love her dearly, rest her soul, but she was a firm believer in the German philosophy that a child is better to be seen than heard. And I used to like resist that. I mean, I wanted to be heard. So sometimes when I'd raise my voice against my mother, I would hear and see the German kind of never spare the rod you know what's going to happen if you spare the rod. What's that saying? Anybody know that one? If you spare the rod,
Spare-
you
spoil the child.
exactly. Thank you, Fatima. Well, that's a lie. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just an old biblical idea about, you know, breaking the will of a child. The great Alice Miller wrote a wonderful book, Drama of a Gifted Child, that she said sometimes parents need to break the will of a child or they become too full of themselves. So that's part of what was happening, I'm sure, at that point. But this picture reminds me of where I was at age 15, not a real happy camper. And I have a couple of stories, a couple of crossroads that really impacted my life. And this was one of them. I'm 15 years old in school. And one day we're starting a food fight in the cafeteria. So we're throwing food around and I feel a hand come up behind me and a firm hand sat on my shoulder and said, "Lee, come with me." And here it was my coach of my football team when I was a kid and I was on football, and I wasn't a great athlete. I was not a great star, but I loved being part of a team, loved sports. And he took me down to his office. His name was Coach Frank. And Coach Frank, I thought for sure was going to suspend me. He caught me throwing food and he said, "No, sit down here." He goes, I'll be right back. But before I go, I want you to think about something. I thought he was going to go to the principal and suspend me. He said to me, he goes, "I've been watching you for the last couple of weeks. I've noticed you've been sitting with different kids at lunch." And my first thought was like, how the hell does he know who I'm sitting with at lunch? There's hundreds of us and a few adults. He said, "I noticed you're sitting with different friends at lunch. I wonder what that's about. But more importantly," he said, "I wonder if you really like the young man that you're becoming. I wonder if you like the young man that you're becoming." And off he went. He came back in 5 minutes and I thought for sure I was going to be asked to go home and be suspended. But he said to me, "Now, where are you supposed to be?" I said, "I'm supposed to be right here. You told me to wait here." He said, "No, what class are you supposed to go to?" I said, "I don't know what class it was, but wherever I went, he gave me a pass. He said, 'Off you go.' And I just left. I thought, oh, that was weird. But I never forgot the question. Never forgot his asking me what, if I was happy with the young man that I was becoming. Two things in the question struck me. He called me a young man. I thought I was a boy. I thought I was just a boy, but he said to me I was a young man, and I wasn't yet there yet because he said that I'm becoming. So one of the great philosophers, I forget his name right now, from France, has said all of life is a journey to become something that you're not yet there yet. We're on a journey. Well, now I'm an old man. Now, in some ways, very young still. I'm busy being born every day, but now 50 years later, I very much like the old man I've become. I'm very proud of myself and my life and what I've done with it. I want to work on yet. But what happened in that moment is I decided that he was right. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was at a real big crossroad. Most of those kids I hung with were either heading for jail, I learned later, drug abuse, violence, and I was really searching for an identity. But I found at that moment I had to change directions. Well, what happened is, here's Coach Frank. He passed many years ago, but this is what men looked like in the 1960s, all crew cuts. This is how they wore their coaching outfits. Willie Frank, I never forgot him, because what happened is I became a lot happier. You can see the change in me in just a couple of years. No black eye, a glint in my eye, more of a smile. I don't have any smirk on my face. And I changed directions. Years later, I wrote that story up about how Coach Frank's question, and again, my whole theme of my stories is the questions that imprinted on me of the importance of my internal journey and where I was as an individual. So years later, that story I just shared with you showed up in this book, Just When I Needed You. It was a book published by Search Institute. And they sent me they had 1,000 submissions. They collected 40 stories. And I was so struck because I never thought I was a good writer, but I imagine my story struck a nerve with the editor. They sent me 2 copies of the book, said one is for you and one is for you to go find Coach Frank. I thought, oh my God, this was years later. Well, in my community, when teachers retire, they don't leave the community, they hang here. And I found the diner that they have breakfast. They have a little breakfast club, these retired teachers. And I walked in and I was so nervous. I gave the book to Coach Frank and I said, do you remember that day? Do you remember that day? And he looked at me and thought for a few seconds, said, I'm sorry, I don't remember that day at all. And I said to him, you know, and I got really emotional because it was like being in front of my father in a way, because he was a father figure as a kid. I said, you know, Coach, it doesn't matter because you must have said that to 1,000 people. And I remember it because I'm one of so many people probably that you said that to. And he said, well, it's just the way I was. I said, you didn't punish me, you didn't suspend me. And you know what these other gentlemen did? It was all men, it was like a men's breakfast club. They gave up, they stood up and they gave him a standing ovation. They said, this is what we do. And I just always remember that story. And I share it in many of my talks with teachers to remind them that every minute, every conversation has the potential and power to change someone's life. And it certainly did mine. I mean, it was big because I really stopped hanging out with some folks and I was very lonely for that next year because I didn't feel I had any friends and, you know, off I went to high school and college. So the next pivotal story that I want to share with you is years later, 1999. So fast forward to 1999, April of 1999. Do you remember what happened in America schools in April of 1999? April 20th to be exact. Does anybody remember that date? April 20th, 1999. Sage, I know you know the answer to that. What happened on April 20th, 1999?
Columbine.
Columbia, or what was it? Columbine.
Columbine, exactly. So there I was in Bhutan, a small Himalayan country in the far east. I was 45 years old. Sage was about 6 years old, I guess, at that point. And I was very miserable because I took a job as the director of human resources. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not a corporate HR guy. I'm a teacher. I'm a community activist, I guess I would call myself. But the gentleman in this picture, you might know the person on the left. His name is Joseph Campbell. Joe Campbell was well known through a Bill Moyers interview, and the person on the right was one of his colleagues, Sam Kean, who is now 90 years old. And I made friends with Sam Kean many years ago, about that same time in 1990s. And Sam and Joe had been doing work around the world on mythology and doing seminars and workshops about helping people understand that we're all on a hero's journey, whether we choose to take it or not. That most of the world had been explored. There, you know, we've been to the moon, we've been to the bottom of the ocean. One time I heard a great quote that the longest journey a person takes is from their mind to their heart, which is about 18 inches. So we don't have thousands of miles to go, but 18 inches from our heads to our heart. How do we connect our head and our heart? So one day I said to Sam, I was so unhappy with my corporate job. He said, you don't sound very happy. I said, I'm miserable. He said, well, he said, you don't sound like you're on your path where you should be at this point. I said, I'm not. He said, well, I think you got two questions to ask in your life. And this is the next period that was so pivotal about questions that someone asked me. He said, you got two questions to ask in your life. Where am I going? And who will go with me? And then he'd wait for a few seconds to let that sink in a little bit. And then he said, if you get them in the wrong order, you're in trouble. And he's so, you know, powerful. He has a voice from, you know, deep resonant voice. It really, I never forgot the questions because I was not on my path. And he said, you got them in the wrong order. You're not a corporate guy. What do you want to do with your life? I said, I want to be a teacher. I want to go back to teaching. I want to work with my community. I want to work with young people again. He said, well, come to Bhutan. We might need a little, you know, reset. I said, Bhutan, I didn't even know where Bhutan was. Bhutan, I don't think I ever heard of it until he asked me those questions. I said, well, what's in Bhutan? He goes, well, I take about 15 to 17 people every year and we'd go on a 3 to 4 week journey, and we just unplug from the world. We unplug and we have no computers. And at that point, there was no iPhones, there was no cell phones. So there I was in April of '99 in this tiny Bhutanese culture. If anybody's ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's a Buddhist country. It's the land of gross national happiness. That's actually what they were starting to discover many, many, many years ago, that there is a pursuit of being happy and doing what you're here to do. So there we were. And just to finish this story is this was the morning shortly after the shootings out in Colorado and Columbine. They got us off the bus and they said, there's a school that we'd like to visit. I was so excited because I'm a teacher. I wanted to visit the schools, and they're going to bring all the community out to greet us. So they have all these people in this little dirt road as we walked into town. You can see the students here on the left, the school's up on the upper left. Those were our tents that we were sleeping in. So we walked into this village, all the folks came down, they shut down the village stores, and the monks from the local temples came. And there we were walking into this town. We walked into the town and they formed the circle. So here we were in the circle, standing and being greeted by our guest. And what you see around my neck is a silk scarf that is a traditional Buddhist gift to people. The silk is representative of a smooth journey. So as they gave each of us a scarf around our neck, I started crying. And every time I tell this story, it's so embedded in my cells that the sadness that we had just heard about Columbine, we thought 50 people were murdered. But as they put this scarf around my neck, I got very emotional. And the man to the left of the monk, so this monk was the spiritual leader in the community. The man to the left was his nephew, and the monk did not speak English. So the nephew interpreted, said, "What is wrong?" And the monk said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "We just learned in our country that 50 people were murdered." Turned out 15 later, it was 15. And I said, "I'm just so sad." I said, "I don't know if I want to go back to America. It's just so," I knew I was going to go back. Sage was waiting for me. My wife would have killed me. They "Aren't you coming home?" So I did go back, but with the gift. And I still have this scarf. I still have it. It's gonna be with me forever, because the scarf is symbolic of the awareness that I had at that point. Because then I said to the monk, he said, "What happened?" I said, this terrible tragedy." I said, "How could anything like that possibly happen between humans?" And he thought for a moment, and I remember his face turned all red as if he was soaking in all the pain that he saw in my face. And he said, "That can never happen here." I said, "Why not?" And then he kind of made a little comment that I've never forgot. He said, "We have no guns. You have too many guns in America." And then he got really more serious and he said, "It can't happen here because our minds are different." He said, "There must be some diseased part of your mind." And he didn't mean mind, he meant as a culture. There must be some disease that's contaminating your minds. He said, and he pointed to a pond nearby. He goes, "Now look at that pond. That pond is as calm as many of our minds." No, I'm not a meditator, but what he talked about was meditation, prayer, and living life as it's to be lived, living in the natural rhythm, what the Greeks called the, kairos, worshiping the God of like natural rhythms. And their culture is slowed down. And then he said something I never forgot. He said, "As long as you keep talking, there's hope." He said, "Your culture did not come from nowhere. You evolved into this culture over many centuries. You can get out of it if you keep talking." So I came back home and I decided to leave the corporate job. And I knew that I always was going to be doing this work. I just didn't know how I was going to make a living at it. Because how do I go from corporate HR to, a job where I'm going to be able to make a living and raise my family and take care of business? But that's how I did it. That's what I did. I came home and I decided to go back into my field and work with restorative justice in schools. And I do that work all the time now. Now, how Peter Block comes to be in my life is when I read his book in 2008. I had never heard of Peter. And, I guess I didn't spend much time reading the literature when I was HR director because he was very well known in the field of business. I discovered him in 2008 when he wrote Community, the Structure of Belonging. Inside that book, there's a chapter called The Restorative Community. And I thought, that's so right where I'm at. And inside his book, he gave us so many beautiful questions. So what I've been doing with the work since then is using his questions as a way to build connections in every group I talk to. And for the first hour, I put people in small groups and ask them questions like, why is it important for you to be here? How much participation you plan to bring to this event? What crossroads are you at this point in your life? What is something that you're really concerned about? And where have you said yes to too many things in your life? What do you need to say no more? What no are you postponing? All the questions I've used in every talk I've given. And if you know, I don't know if any of you here educators or teachers will tell you that they're so tired of professional development hours sometimes because they go to them and it's like a waste of time. Nothing's going to come from it. There's not enough resources. Somebody gets a grant and wants to do this kind of thing. Just last week, we learned in the New York Times that the reading experts about how to teach reading are finally coming back to phonics. It's like we need the sound words out. So this whole transformation is occurring about how the human brain learns language and reading. So, we're still figuring this stuff out, but most teachers come to PD like, okay, what's this guy got? What am I going to learn from this woman? What do they got? Because they've heard thousands of hours of things and things don't change sometimes. I cannot tell you enough, folks, that every time I use Peter's questions, people don't want to leave the small group. I throw up my beginning slide. They go, can we hold off on the PowerPoint? And I love Peter's quote. He goes, we don't need any more PowerPoints. We need powerful conversations. I love it. Well, I had to show 4 slides of PowerPoint, so forgive me. But anyway, so here's what I suggest today. We have about a half an hour left. I just thought it'd be helpful to try to see if those questions strike a nerve in any of you about where are you going? And who's going with you? Because when Sam Keen shared those questions with me in Bhutan, he had the questions asked of him by a great Black mystic, Howard Thurman. Sam's mentor was Howard Thurman. If some of you know Howard Thurman, he was one of the first people in the country of America that began a Unitarian church in San Francisco. So I felt so blessed that, I was coming to meet Sam at a point in my life, in my midlife, that he'd been mentored and influenced by Howard and Joe Campbell and all these mythic questions. Where are we going? What's the purpose of my life? Who do I sacrifice to? What do I sacrifice to? What's this costing me? And Sam had the questions asked of him when his marriage went on the rocks and he got hooked up with the wrong relationship again. And Howard, he tells a story that Howard brought him over to Boston. He was living in Boston, went to Harvard as a student. Howard was a chaplain at, I forget what the name of the chaplain was at Boston. Anyway, Howard's sitting there with Sam. They poured a glass of whiskey. And Howard says to Sam, Sam, where are you going with your life? Because this relationship you're in again is not working. And who's going to go with you? So those questions are so powerful when you think about, am I in the right relationship? What the Buddhists always ask us, are you in the right relationship with yourself? Do you have the right livelihood? Do you have the right conversations? Do you have the right language? All of it is self-aligning to your own purpose. And if you believe that every human is as precious as everything created under the sun, that we all have an internal blueprint. And some of us know early on, like what we're here to do. Oh, I'm gonna work on machines. I'm gonna build machines. I'm gonna invent things. Or I'm gonna sing. I'm gonna dance. I'm gonna be an artist. I'm gonna be a teacher. I'm gonna be an engineer. Or I'm gonna be my own business leader, whatever. So to me, that's what this question is about. Who's going with you once you decide where you're going? Some people hook up with the wrong company, the wrong relationship, the wrong mosque, the wrong church, whatever. So see what happens with those questions. Have you ever faced a crossroad where you realize, oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong relationship? And that's a tough decision, especially if it's one where there's a legal entanglement like marriage or economics, or I'm in the wrong community or the wrong church. So those are my questions to you as we break into a small group. Let's just do another 12 minutes. Is that good, Maya? Jeff?
Yeah, I think we do 15, Lee. So repeat the questions for us.
So the questions are, so have you ever faced a crossroad around the distinction between where am I going and who or what who's going to be going with me? So when I came back from Bhutan, I realized I had my questions in the wrong order. I wanted to leave my company and start my own nonprofit, Just Community. I didn't get a single phone call for a year. I was, scared I wasn't going to have enough money. So does that strike you at all? Where am I going and who will go with me? Have you ever had to make a conversation around that? Is that clear enough, people, folks? Okay. All right. We'll see you in a bit. Thanks.
I didn't think that it would automatically send them. I thought that they would have to accept. Sorry.
That's weird. Yeah, that time it did. So, all right.
Normally it like asks, so that's why I was like, oh, it's okay.